All right, ladies and gentlemen, our second installment in our look at Rome and our second look at the Roman Republic. This time we're going to look at the expansion of the Roman state very, very quickly. Um, from its position along the uh, western coastline of the Italian peninsula, the Roman city-state was being attacked by hill tribesmen from the Apennine regions in central Italy. And so the Roman farmers first needed to figure out a way to defend themselves and formed a military, fought in the tactics that were similar to the Greeks. Uh, Local farmers were there to equip themselves. They fashioned a reputable um, military system. Sorry about that. And they were also able to enlist other Latin groups in the area to fight against the Samnite hill tribes. So after defending themselves from these particular tribesmen, they started to attack, or they were attacked by Etruscans from the north. They went on the offensive, eventually stabilizing their northern frontier, and then turned their attention to the Greeks in the south. Um, this Fighting the Greeks was not exactly easy for the Romans. Um, the Greeks were some of the greatest fighters of the age by the 200s BCE. That was the time just the Hellenistic period, just after Alexander the Great. So the Greeks had basically control of the successor armies to Alexander's Macedonians. The great advantage that the Romans had was that they were fighting on home turf, and they could call for reinforcements very quickly from Italy, whereas the Greeks had to wait for transports to come from mainland Greece. And because the Greek city-states were notorious for not getting along with each other, sometimes those reinforcements did not arrive. So while the Greeks could deal pretty significant blows to the Romans, they couldn't keep up with Roman ability to recover and fight another day. And so eventually the Greeks were lost control of southern Italy. All right, once the Romans had managed to defeat the Greeks in the south, they turned in the south of Italy. They had basically unified the Italian peninsula. They were able to move now against another potential maritime rival in the western Mediterranean, and that's the city of Carthage, which was established as a Phoenician colony. The initial bone of contention was over the island of Sicily, which the Italians wanted to seize as a major grain supply to the ever-expanding population in the Italian peninsula. Also, the islands of the islands of Sardinia and Corsica in the western Mediterranean were potentially up for grabs. One of the ways in which the Carthaginians and the Romans fought each other were essentially bringing allies into the game over the course of the three Punic Wars. Rome cultivated allies in Spain, as did the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians also sought allies in the Greek world. In the end, however, despite the best efforts of Carthage's generals, particularly that of Hannibal, to defeat the Italians, in fact, in Italy, the Romans were able to put together a fleet, defeat the Carthaginians in Spain and in North Africa, and then finally to lay siege to Carthage itself, in which Hannibal was actually recalled at the end of the Second Punic War in order to defend the city, and lost the Battle of Zama, and therefore was defeated by the Roman general Scipio. One more Punic War was really designed to punish the Carthaginians and destroy the city itself. With Carthage defeated, Rome was the master of the western Mediterranean. There were no serious rivals to them there. And then once they had defeated the Carthaginians in the west, they were able to turn against their former allies, the former allies of Carthage in the eastern Mediterranean, namely the Greeks. And we can see on this map Carthage's control of North Africa here, along with Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica, and then their allies in Spain here. So these areas all brought into the Roman sphere of influence by the end of the Third Punic War, and then which ends at around 149 BCE, and then they turn on the Greeks over here. So the Roman world by about the year 100 consists of all of this. Not Gaul, not much of Asia Minor, but some of it, and not yet Egypt. In terms of governing the Republic, as the Republic expanded first into Sicily, a new way of administering these overseas territories had to be created, and the idea was to not simply include that territory into the heart of the Republic and grant immediate citizenship to the newly conquered area, but to make it into a province which had another governor and another system, another hierarchy of control and government for that particular province. And so it was not directly controlled by Rome, only indirectly through the appointment of a governor. Governors were in charge of collecting taxes, defending the empire. The role of the consul, for instance, would be much weaker in a province where the governors, especially the governor's military power, would be much stronger. And that's the one strange thing about provincial life, is that in the heart of Rome, tax collection and defense were ideas or roles that were separated between the two consuls. But in the provinces, the governors had both of those issues under their direct control, therefore making the governors in some ways stronger administrators than the consuls back in Rome. And what we will see is, in time, provincial governors, provincial generals will have so much at their disposal that being a governor of the provinces becomes such a training ground that many of them will come back to Rome and make a bid to be dictator, or in the later Roman Empire to become an emperor. So that's really the training ground for imperial government, will be in the governorships of the provinces, not in coming out of the Senate in Rome. And that'll be a shift that we'll see happen around the year around the year 50 to 100 BCE. That change will happen. Nevertheless, during the Republic, senators or their family members were still appointed to high positions in the provinces, and this leads to a form of political corruption that we call nepotism, where members of one particular family are favored over another. And yet, that's really the way that Rome had always operated. It was all part of that paterfamilias, those close families and so on and so forth, that made the wheels of that type of government really work, roll on. The Republic came under a lot of pressure as it expanded, and it was really a problem for administration. The traditional way that a city governed itself was becoming less and less feasible, as that city has now expanded to become what we would call an empire, to have colonies. A republic, it's true, but a republic with colonies around the world. And so you need a different kind of administration. That's one issue. And appointing governors was a good step, but it was a very messy affair, and one that tended again to lead towards corruption. Another issue was who owns all this new land? Is this land that's going to be opened up to all of these, average people, plebeians, normal farmers, so that they can, there's not enough land in Italy so they can go overseas and they can set up a farm of their own and become an independent farmer and have enough money, for instance, to be in the army. Because there was a wealth requirement to be in the army. You had to be able to equip yourselves. Could you be this independent farmer of Roman legend? Well, or would that land simply be redistributed to the people who already had big farms in the Italian peninsula, and now they would just have a great farm in Italy and a great farm in Spain, or another great plantation in North Africa, or another great farm in Greece or Asia Minor. And so that there would still be the same very small group of people who had access to land and wealth, but their land and wealth would now just become that much greater than that of the small farmer. Of course, since the senatorial class were the landowners, were the people who had wealth and power and prestige, and were the ones who were making the decisions, they decided in their own interest, in their own favor. And so instead of opening up land to new farms, expanding the population, the large landowners were given first access and excluded the small Roman farmer. A number of peasants who were able to, as a result of this, the number of peasants who were able to serve in the military declined sharply because they didn't meet that land-owning requirement. However, there were new leaders who emerged after the year 100 BCE who cultivated a following among these landless, and as a result became very dangerous political leaders, at least to the Roman aristocratic senatorial class. These new leaders got a following among the landless poor, and in some ways, or in many cases, tried to get them access to the military, to which they had been denied before that. And so you can actually see legions being constituted, military units being constituted of landless people. Well, that's very convenient as a political leader, because now, all of a sudden, you don't have just supporters who are poor and landless, but you have supporters who are trained soldiers, who are trained Roman legionaries, who are otherwise landless and poor. Your supporters now are an army. And this will make the late Roman Republic very unstable. It will be a time period when a series of military leaders, who are also political leaders or potential political leaders, will make their bid to run the Roman Republic. And what ends up happening is some power sharing agreements, that instead of having 2 consuls, you have 3. They're called triumvirates. Or sometimes you have outright dictatorships, Marius, Sulla, the dictatorships of the Gracchi brothers, and finally the dictatorship of Julius Caesar. It will be the assassination of Julius Caesar that will really bring about the most radical shift in the history of the Roman Republic, and will bring an end to the Republic. The years of civil war, from 44 BCE all the way down to the 20s BCE, will be a time in which Romans give up on the idea of having the principal power reside with the Senate, and will begin to favor a first among equals, a first citizen, which they call the prince or princeps. We typically don't call him the princeps too much today, because the type of authority that he wielded was called in Latin imperium, a combination of powers, of civil power, of military and religious authority. And so, as the Republic struggles to maintain order, a new world order for Rome will arise, and that is the order which rests on imperium. And so we will see the shift in our next series of lectures between the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. Thanks very much.